And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. Today, it's a conversation that all of you will want to sit in and listen because it's about workers demanding more pay. Across the board, we're seeing this agitation for more pay. We've heard the aggrieved public servants, we've heard UTAC, and today we've heard from, I guess, the most troubling of all, the Ghana Medical Association. So really, the big question to ask is, where is the justification for the demands that the workers are making on the government? This is the GMA, the Ghana Medical Association. As they say on the labor front, when the Ghana Medical Association coughs, we all catch cold. Because for them, it's really about the life. It's a life and death situation when they withdraw their service, especially in the midst of COVID. And yet, they've served notice that if by 30th September, their grievances relating to outstanding issues and arrears are not addressed, they have laid out a roadmap that will lead to an eventual complete withdrawal of services at the hospitals across the country. This is the roadmap that they gave today. So the roadmap begins on October 1 with the withdrawal of outpatient services suspended from October 1 by doctors across the country. And then they go to October 8th. That will mean the withdrawal of all inpatient services effective this particular date. And if, after this date, the issues that they just put across here, arrears haven't been paid, as well as the outstanding issues, we'll come to what the outstanding issues are shortly. If that have not been addressed, they say they get to the final point where we have a complete withdrawal of all services on this particular day. So this is pretty alarming. It's been quite a while since the Ghana Medical Association had even come public with a position such as this. But then again, we're going to be looking at the demands that they're making and analyzing it to see whether they are being fair in this particular matter. Then, of course, there's the University Teachers Association of Ghana also making demands. And their timing is also pretty precarious because schools are just about entering into the examination period, and the students need their teachers to be around to invigilate. In fact, without them, we're not going to have the exams because who's going to invigilate it? Same with the Ghana Medical Association, because of the time we are in, we're in the firm grips of a third wave. UTAC have throughout today been in meetings with the employment ministry. We are trying to work the phone lines because they've been meeting until very, very late. They possibly are still in a meeting all day. We'll try and get the very latest for you here on PM Express if they've managed to strike a deal that will mean they go to work tomorrow, because they've been on strike since Monday. What are their issues? They are demanding the implementation of the 2012 single spine package. But for our purposes today, they are demanding that the government put entry-level lecturers on a salary of $2,084 in Ghana. This is a pretty significant amount, right? That's what they're demanding by UTAC. But the question to ask is, can government afford all these? Can government afford $2,084? Can government afford paying all the arrears that GMA is talking about? And then remember, last week, the aggrieved public sector workers also make demand. They say the 4% increase in the minimum wage is simply unacceptable, and so they rejected it. So how much exactly are the public sector workers asking for? And the fundamental question I'm going to ask, we're going to interrogate is, can government afford? Because already, this is the 2021 budget that my research desk pulled up for us, just so that you can appreciate what is happening already. As much as 26% of everything that this country makes, from the revenue you pay, from everything else that comes into the pool, we spend 26% of that on workers alone, paying compensation. How much in monetary terms? This is jaw-dropping, right? 30 billion cedis just to pay workers. That's a huge amount. How is this not enough for workers? How? We'll get into that very shortly. Now, compare it to other things, and you begin to see Some may say that the government is spending a lot already on workers. In fact, this is the 2021 budget expenditure breakdown, right? And that tells a very important story that we want to go through for you very quickly. Because if you look at the 2021 budget, there are two line items that jump at you. The first one is, of course, compensation, right? Then the second one is interest payments. For a very long time, and I must tell you this, for a very long time, compensation has been the biggest line item. What government spend their money on, pay workers, biggest. This is the only year for a very long time that interest payments have overtaken compensation for a very long time. But just look at the story. Again, as I said, so if you look at total budget amount, right, compensation, interest payments, and then the amount left. So this is it. The workers will take 26% of everything Ghana is making. Then remaining 31% will go to pay interest. The question is, for all those of us who are not in the public sector, what is left for us? To build the roads, to build the schools, etc. We are only left with that amount here. 47 billion. The workers alone are taking 30 billion of that amount. So me and you only get 37 billion for the roads and everything else that we need in this country. I mean, so the argument has always been, but workers are getting enough already. In fact, the finance minister in his media budget put it this way. He says, we cannot share what we do not have. In fact, let me go to that for you shortly. So this is the question that we have to get down to. Are the increments possible? Now, before I get to finance this quote, our researchers did a very fantastic job of trying to track for us in the line graph what is happening in the relationship between compensation to employees and total expenditure. This is a very interesting graph because pay attention to it. It tells you what has happened to workers' salary as opposed to other things that government is spending money on. Where is the bulk of the expenditure for government going? Remember what I've said before, but this is also a different graph that will tell a different story. So this is expenditure, total expenditure, right? It includes everything else, includes salary and everything, right? If you see the climb, very steep. So this, by the way, is in billions of cedis. So as of 2016, when this government, 2017, when it took power, we were spending 52 billion. Total expenditure includes compensation. 2018 went up slightly, just by 6 billion. And then 2019, it went up again, 68 billion. Guess what? In 2020, it shoots up to 96 billion. But remember something. Here is when COVID hit. This year, 2020, that's when COVID hit. So COVID hit, we're beginning to spend quite a significant amount on expenditure, right? Includes compensation. And then in 2021, as projected, this year, look at that. But look at the gap between what we are spending monies on everything on and look at compensation in this red line. Compensation, what this line tells you that compensation to public sector workers hasn't really increased that significantly in comparison to everything else government is spending their money on. Because you look at here, in 2016, the government was spending 14 billion. It didn't really change in 2017 because there was no increase, the increase was so minor, same. 2018, we are talking about 19 billion, and then 22. So the graph tells a story. The increase compared to what else government is spending money on and the compensation hasn't been that significant, right? So that's why if you're working and look at it, but yeah, I mean, this tells the story that increases in salary has been pretty slow compared to all the other things we're spending our money on. Government is spending far more on everything else and not as much on workers' compensation. As the graph has said, if you're doing the graph over trend, over time, from 2016 to 2020, that is the story. Nonetheless, there has been an upward trajectory, right? It's still climbed up, but not as steep as everything else. So that's the story. You see the gap here? A pretty significant gap, right? So government and workers have always been negotiating over this. So what is the finance minister's position? The finance minister says, for us to pay you decent wages, and this is a quote in the budget, the 2021 media budget, for us to pay you decent wages, a few things must happen. He laid it out. He says, first, collectively, we must improve productivity. That's the first thing the finance minister said. Improve productivity. If you want decent, improve productivity. Secondly, we must also raise more revenue. Then we can ensure, quote, ensure decent wages, again, quote, in the years to come. So there's a certain admission. But what workers are getting currently is not necessarily decent wages. I think government understands that more could be done. But within the circumstances of low productivity and low revenues, this is what government can do for now. That is a direct quote in page 4 of the statement that was read in Parliament. Find it there. You find this there. It lays it out. And then he makes the point, controversially, where some of the workers have taken offense, that simply at the end of this, government cannot share what it doesn't have. We'll get into that very shortly. A very fascinating conversation about to ensue. We're talking to some of the workers unions, who have already out there agitating on all that I just presented. So stay with me. This affects all of you. Let's break this down properly, and let's see where the justification is. Back after this break. And thank you for joining us on PM Express. My guest joining me right now on Zoom is Titus Bayo. He's the Deputy General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association. Also joining me is Norbert Gbogbochi. He's the lead convener of the Public Sector Workers Union. Is it the Public Sector Workers Union or Aggrieved Public Sector?
Sector Workers Ghana.
Okay.
Aggrieved.
Aggrieved Public Sector Workers. Union. Thank you very much. And we also have Austin Gama. He's a labor expert, the Deputy Minister of Employment and Labor Relations by Rekrubobe. We expect him to join us. Dr. Samuel Inkumban, who is the president of the UG chapter of the University Teachers Association of Ghana, UTAG, are expected to join after the meeting that they've been in all day, trying to get them back to classrooms tomorrow. So it's been a pretty busy day. For the employment minister, indeed, and we're watching that closely. Once we get the very latest from that, we'll get it to you and get them also to tell us what had been agreed and whether or not they're going back to the classroom, so students those who've left campuses can go back to campus. So stay with me on this. We'll get Titus Bayo shortly in, because they are the latest to indicate that they were going to embark on a strike after the 30th of September ultimatum they give into government. We'll get into the details of what their issues are shortly. But let's start with the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is about salaries. We've seen that from UTAG. We're talking about arrears for GMA, and now for the public sector workers, they are talking about the fundamental minimum wage. You say it's 4%.
Am I the one saying it?
That's what it is.
Good evening to your viewers and public sector workers in particular. We appreciate their effort in trying to help us move to where we should have been. So I greet them. Are you telling me it's 4% or you know it's 4%?
Yeah, I mean, the increase, after some people say it's not 4, it's 6%.
4% for this 2021, 7% for 2022. That is what has been agreed on.
Okay.
And I ask, what is that meant for?
Why do you say it's not enough?
So that is why I'm asking what it's meant for.
The minimum wage?
No, when you talk about that salaries have been increased by 4%, what do they intend to achieve? You know, there are factors that goes into increment of salaries. You understand? It emanates from maybe how do we call it? Let me talk about factors of inflation and other things. You understand? So you are trying to mitigate, or you are trying to get us to a point where the monies we receive will not devaluate to a certain point that it will make life impossible for the worker. So you bring an increment to sort of cushion them. You understand?
But the minimum wage is a minimum wage. It's not salary increase.
No, when you talk about minimum, you are talking about two things here.
Yeah.
Minimum wage is different from base pay increment.
Yeah.
Minimum wage affects mostly the private sector.
Yeah.
They were giving, how do we call it, the 6 and 8%. 6 for 2021, 8 for 2022.
But that's minimum wage.
That's minimum wage.
Yes.
But we are talking about base pay. Because we, the public sector, we normally, how do we call it? Base pay? It is the increment in base pay that affects our salary.
So base pay, in a sense, is the base below which you shouldn't go.
That is it. Okay. Exactly.
So when you talk about minimum, so that is my point. My point is, it doesn't mean that they are going to increase your salary by 4% alone. It means that it might go way up higher.
No. It means that whatever basic salary you are receiving, you are going to have an increment of 4%.
Yeah. And you said that's not enough.
Oh. Have you calculated 4% of 400 Ghana cedis? Are you aware that there are people working in the public sector that are receiving 400 Ghana cedis? And when you calculate 4% of 400 or 500 Ghana cedis, let me use 1,000. 1,000, you are getting somewhere 40 cedis, right? 1,000, 40 cedis. 500, you are getting 20 cedis. And what is that meant for?
We just illustrate. Let's take workers globally. I mean the workers' numbers. Compensation alone to yourself and your colleagues in the public sector alone. It is 26% of everything else that this country is making.
Thank you.
30 billion of that.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time we pay you, there's very little left in the kitty for me and everybody else to do roads and etc. Why?
Who is bringing that everything else? Who is bringing that money? You know, public sector workers.
That's not true. We all pay taxes. We all pay. That all go.
No, before the tax will come, somebody must work. The tax. Taxes are not automatic.
I'm paying taxes that go into
there are workers. Yes, no matter how you pay the taxes, it must go through, how do we call it, the effort of somebody. And that is the public sector worker. You understand? We have already discussed that of the private sector. So the people that work for you to get the money must be remunerated well.
No, but I'm just trying to point out to you that it's not accurate to say the public sector workers, because of the public sector workers that we have that pool, that we have that pool of money.
Are you saying that if there is no work done, monies will come? Even collection of revenue has to come through, how do we call it, workers.
Then you are not being efficient, because if you are, we are raising a lot more money.
That is the work of the manager and not the work of the employee.
I see.
That is the work of the manager and not the work of the employee. The work of the manager is to make sure that at least you put variables in place and make sure you maximize profit. But you don't wait when how do we call it? There is time for negotiations for you to increase salary. Then you start bringing in sentimental issues. Start bringing in issues that you think you use against your employee.
Bottom line, we're paying you 30 billion, 36% of everything we are making. Aren't we paying you enough already?
No, you have to break that down. Go into it and look at the categories of people that are taking that much.
In fact,
are you aware that we are in COVID time?
Yes.
You are aware? And there was a lockdown in 2020. Very well. And that things are that difficult. So government came out telling us that things were very difficult and it will be very difficult for them to increase salaries. You heard that. Then fast forward, we are here today. Public sector workers' salaries have been increased by 4%. Of which we said, and we are still saying that it is an insult to the public sector worker. Are you aware that a category of people's salaries have been increased by 79?
Hold on for that. I'll come to that. I know that's a controversial point. Let me bring in Titus Beyo, who is a medical doctor. He's a Deputy General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association. They issued a statement today. Hello, Titus. Hello, Titus. Can you unmute for me?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Good evening, Evans.
Yes, great to have you, Titus. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Let me ask you first. just to clarify, the 4% increase for public sector workers, does that affect doctors in the public sector?
Yes, it does.
Oh, okay. So that means that you're also only going to get 4% increase in your salary?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Essentially.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes.
I see. Okay. Are you in agreement with those who say it's too small?
I don't go there.
Okay.
Definitely, the value looks small. Be that as it may, our leaders went in for the negotiations. I'm not sure fully everything that went on, but we were aware that it has to be a give and take. And at the end of the day, they concluded on that. As you can see, generally, people are not content. But once, as law-abiding citizens, I would say that once you have gone into an agreement and you have signed to it, it will be difficult to stand out now and scream. And so I know that once the organized labor, the public sector joint negotiation committee on which we are represented took that decision, it's difficult for me to come and make a dissenting opinion now.
Yeah.
But obviously, people have concerns with it.
But you fundamentally in your statement, you are also asking for what you believe to be your fair share, which is you signed conditions of service document in 2019. You are owed arrears, and you want it now. That's accurate.
Yes. Sorry, can you go over that?
No, I mean just to reiterate what you are asking for now: arrears and implementation of the service conditions that you signed in 2019. Correct?
Yes. That is not related to the current 4% discussion.
Yes.
This is our codified conditions of service. Yes. And that is what we want implemented now.
Let me throw this at you because we just did analysis on the graphs and the numbers. Obviously, you're asking this because, and as I said, 2019, so it's been 2019, 2020, almost 2 years since this was signed, and government still hasn't implemented, for which reason you've laid a roadmap. Isn't it because, obviously, government can't afford? In fact, let me read to you something that the finance minister said in his media budget review, I guess, to anchor this question I'm asking you. The finance minister in his budget was clear that we cannot share what we don't have. Isn't that fundamentally what the problem is?
Well, that is the headache of the finance minister and government. As far as I am concerned, you have engaged me, you have signed a conditions of service document with me. In the course of negotiations for that document to be signed, at every step of the way, government parties will go and do the necessary consultations to look at the impact on the national wage budget, the impact on their finances, and all these were considered at the point of signing. And so midway, if you tell me that you are not going to be able to do it because you don't have what it is to share, and I think it is not fair. Per labor practice, you cannot unilaterally vary an agreement that you have. I cannot also get up and say that, okay, look, it looks like I'm not getting what is due me, and therefore let me give government half of my time and use my time for something else. That will be unilaterally varying the agreement. I have played my part of that agreement. The average doctor in Ghana is playing that part of the agreement, working out their lungs, and deserve what they deserve. Per the agreement, they should get what is due them. And so to the extent that you negotiated and signed on, you have not called for renegotiation, you cannot take a unilateral position and say that, no, I don't have what it is to share. I think that is just fair.
Let me ask, since you signed that document in 2019, the very next year, a few months later, we had COVID. It ravaged the economy, knocked off a lot. The economy it's virtually on its knees now. The government is trying to revive it. We've seen the IMF projections, etc. We are in 2021, where the recovery is beginning. To be realistic, government simply hasn't got it now. I mean, since you signed, COVID has happened and has changed the dynamics of affordability of what government signed on to. Does that play into the consideration at all going forward?
It's very difficult to play the position of government and say that government doesn't have it. Do you really see from what is happening that government doesn't have it? If government doesn't have it and cannot honor what they have committed to us, we can see government honoring their own and honoring it even in excess. I mean, for the basic ones on what you have agreed to give to the person, give to the person. If not, then let's renegotiate and tell us that, okay, look, this is what has happened. We can do this with the rest of your time. You see, I think that this issue of government doesn't have it, because some of our conditions of service that we are talking about, some are not monetary. Some are not monetary. Even those that are monetary, government well considered it, as I emphasized, before signing onto this document. If they think at any point in time there is a change per the labor practice, you need to reopen negotiations. But you don't sit and then you laterally say that because of A, B, C, D, I will not do my part of the deal, whilst you expect the other person to continue to do his part of the deal. I think that's a fundamental point. And if you make the assertion that, okay, the economy is on its knees, we are all struggling, then let us all feel it as a nation. And I can understand why you are seeing a lot of the agitations. If you are saying we are having difficulties, therefore I can give you only 4%, and you are seeing others getting percentages in the 60s and beyond, it's very difficult on that score. But for us, our demand is not based on this current increment. Our demand is basic. You have signed onto something. You have not asked us to review it. You have committed to it. You must deliver as we deliver our parts. That's basically it.
I mean, let me bring in labor expert, Mr. Osingame, onto this conversation. Mr. Osingame, thank you very much for your patience as we listen to the workers. We're still waiting to hear you talk. They've been in a long meeting with the employment minister. But let me ask you, in negotiations, as is possibly going to play out now, it's also hugely about the employer's ability to pay. With everything that has happened with COVID, and as I've demonstrated with the graphs, isn't that what it comes down to? Government's inability to pay. In fact, the finance minister said, and I want to repeat that quote, that we cannot share what we do not have. Does it not come down to that?
Thank you, Evans. Thank you for your very important intro generally. To be honest with you, then it's incumbent on the employer to ensure that they share relevant information with the workers' leaders, as under Section 97 of the Labour Act. If they don't do it that way, the assumption would be that you have something hidden from them, as have been alleged, because I don't know the total figure, that some people have been paid maybe 60, 79, etc. Explain to them in details what he rightly said, you cannot share what you don't have. What do you mean by that? Explain it to them at a well-organized meeting. They shouldn't hear it on radio or television. They are your social partners. They meet you under a well-organized arrangement. That is, parties coming to negotiate with equal powers, so that once you share it with them, they will not ask you more than you have. Obviously, you are a married man. Do you give your money more than you earn? Obviously, it cannot be, because you share that relevant information with your wife. So I think that is important. This is made clear. I think that is about the manner in which we are approaching the negotiation. And Dr. Bayo rightly said, if you negotiate, it's a long-term thing. It's not for 1 year, it's for 2 years, 3 years. Government is supposed to be anticipating, and if there are difficulties along the way, call the social partners you entered into the agreement with to another round of meeting and have that conversation with them. It's not about do or die affair. It's about having a genuine conversation with them. They will appreciate it. And I think that is important we put this in context. The people who are describing themselves as aggrieved workers, are they the people who represented the public sector negotiating committee at the standing joint negotiating committee meeting with the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission? If they are the people, fine. But if they are not the people, and they are the people I know led by the Secretary General of the TUC and other members of the organized labor, then we have to put it properly in context so we don't, belabor the point.
Let me bring in a controversial point about productivity, which in fact the finance minister was emphatic to mention in it. And I must say the productivity question doesn't apply to doctors. Tatalbe, you are not part of this because we celebrate the work doctors have done since last year when COVID came. I think when it comes to productivity, you possibly are top of the list. And so this question doesn't apply to you. It applies to all other public sector workers indeed. But let me ask you, Mr. Game. Finance Minister said, quote, collectively, we will have to improve productivity, raise more revenue, and ensure decent wages in the years to come. Quote, end quote. In that quote, it's almost an admission that what we are paying you now, as of today, we know it is not decent wages. But to arrive at that, quote, in the years to come, we will have to improve productivity first. Do you think that the workers, public sector workers, minus the health sector workers, indeed, because as I've said, they are not part, do you think the public sector workers have done enough to justify a call for more than 4%?
Not just the public sector. Everyone listening to you tonight knows what I'll be saying already. I was sent by the late President Rawlings to inaugurate the National Productivity Center at GIMPA as far back as 1998. Let me tell you that what the president himself said it on a May Day, Workers' May Day, on 2 occasions. And the finance minister have said it before and repeated it during this mid-year budget review. It's appropriate. The law is very clear that the employer, let's not call him government because they will introduce partisan politics into it. The employer has managers who are supposed to be responsible in ensuring that targets are set for each and every one, including doctors, including working people, wherever they find themselves. And they are expected to provide the technical support for the working people to be able to do the work. And the workers, as a duty under Section 11C of the Labour Act, are expected to enhance the productivity of the employer. Then when we come to the area of negotiation, then it's not a matter of only the employer deciding, I'll give you ABC because of either COVID or something. The numbers will turn out automatically because it will be religiously followed and monitored. Every work must be metered, just like we meter water, meter electricity. Work must be metered. Let's call it work meter. So that
if you try what you're saying, the workers will fight it. I mean, didn't we see Dr. Pakwesi Indom try to introduce reform, public sector reform? The public sector workers fought it so hard.
At the time, we didn't have the Labour Act we have. Okay. It's very clear in our Labour Act now, not just that, it's a civilized way of managing salary administration. And let me tell you, the workers will get more. They will get, I repeat, they will get more because the more we have, the more we share. And the sharing, there is a methodology that to be applied. It's very simple. Any HR and human resource practitioner and IR practitioner knows what I'm talking about. So we are actually just either beating about the bush or talking about issues that we cannot implement. And we have people who can help us, and we are pretending we don't have people. We are not bereft of people. This can be done, and it must be done. Otherwise, we will come and meet this same issue next week.
Yeah. Norbert.
Yeah.
I know you agree with that position.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
But the question to ask you is, isn't that shifting blame? What is your responsibility as a worker then, as a public sector worker? If you say, oh, it's my managers, when you know, don't you admit that the public sector worker is generally very low in terms of productivity? Don't you agree?
U.S. is demanding for Ghanaian workers to come up there because after their survey, they are sure that when they compare figures, those from Ghana are the most workaholic. It tells you that the issue is not how do we call it, a Ghanaian worker. The issue is managerial.
But
It's managerial.
You must take responsibility.
No, I have told you that it is the employer's duty to make sure that you put variables in place to maximize profit.
So what is your duty?
So my duty is to make sure I do my work as diligently as possible.
As that, but you are not.
You understand? No. That is not. It is somebody's duty to see to it that I'm doing the work. If I am not doing it, that is why you have the power to hire and fire.
In the public service?
That, yes.
You know that's not. But
who told you? No, it can be done.
The Labor Law.
The Labor Act is there. No. There are exceptions. There are exceptions. So it is not absolute. That you are in an office or you are stationed somewhere supposed to carry out ABC, you do not do it, the manager sees it and say you are protected by the labor law. Is that it?
Let me ask you, so you genuinely, honestly believe that the Ghanaian public sector worker has done enough to deserve more pay than 4%?
More than enough.
Prove it.
Because, yes, if they have not done that enough, one sector wouldn't have enough to be paying up to 79%. Where are they paying from? From which coffers are they making that payment?
No, but that argument cannot be sustained, because that argument, you're talking about the pool, the revenues.
Yes,
the revenues come from the private sector mainly. we all pay the taxes. It's not something that the public sector workers do anything magical.
I have told you that had they not been, yes, there are people put in place to work. Mm-hmm. In Ghana here, we don't have machines that work. There are people that put those resources together. So if you tell me that money is coming from whatever, it is coming from people, and it means that people are working. Mm. It is coming from people, because revenue collection and everything has to come through the, the workers.
Let me ask
and these are the people demanding for, the percentage increment.
Let me ask you the fundamental question. Mm-hmm. Where were you when your leaders were negotiating for the 4%?
I was in this country.
So why?
We gave them 25%. We gave them, you see, their powers.
We had that. That's before we went to negotiation, that you wanted 25%. But
25%.
They had to agree to something.
So what were the issues they tabled? Do you have that in mind? Have you been told? Do you have any idea of the issues they tabled at the negotiation table? Mm. Are you aware they came back having a press conference trying to impose their decisions on us, telling us that they accepted the...
They gave them a mandate.
Yes.
They represented you.
Yes, and it is stated in the Labor Act. It is not absolute. That is why we are saying that there is an aspect that says that you can go for renegotiation. It is stated in there.
Okay, so
that aspect has to be activated.
The final question then, on the back of everything I've said and what Austin Gama has said, is, do you honestly believe in the midst of COVID and how the economy has struggled, the government can afford to pay you anything?
It is in the same midst of COVID that the sector is taking 79%. So there's nothing impossible.
Okay. Titus, let me come back to you. So where we stand now, you've given government 30th September for it to pay arrears. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be significant arrears. And then obviously the other issues relating to the work service conditions. What would it take for you? Are you willing to compromise at all? And where are you willing to compromise?
Evans, I think we've been willing to compromise for a very long time. And we have demonstrated that in our approach to everything. I should state that it's not as though we are at loggerhead with government at this moment.
Yeah.
At the national level, we have been having discussions, and discussions are ongoing with government or with the employer. The pace has been slow. Fortunately, or let me say unfortunately for us in national leadership, the generality of our masses of doctors across the country are not pleased with the pace. And that is why they have had to give us this kind of roadmap. Left to the national leadership alone, we were very sure that we're still negotiating and trying to get the best out of the situation. So with that in the background, we are hopeful that the government side of the negotiation team will be up and doing so that we can conclude on these things. If it comes to compromises, like I said, we have made very useful suggestions at the discussion table because, like I mentioned, a lot of the things we are asking for really are not very much monetary. There is an arrears bit, which is not that significant. But if you look at something like healthcare, these are services we provide. Why can't government just come out with a policy that says that if I work at Kolebu Teaching Hospital, if my wife is coming to Kolebu Teaching Hospital to consult, the same service that I am providing, that person shouldn't pay for that service. This is not government taking money out of the kitty to come and pay, but maybe some shortfall in revenue to government because that money paid would have gone to increase government revenue in the long run. But this has been done for other workers in the public sector. So some of our demands are pretty much not financial, and I need to emphasize on that. I also have to be very candid to say that the document we are dealing with is a very bulky document. Government has done well to implement a lot of it, but there are still thorny issues that need to be addressed. And our members are impatient because this document has a lifespan, and we cannot let it live beyond its lifespan. So we need to get it implemented before it expires. So when government comes to the negotiation table, they only need to be mindful of these deadlines. The people of Ghana need to be mindful of these deadlines because the roadmap is set. We sitting as National Executive Council cannot vary it because it's a roadmap set by our membership. So we need to get down to work so that we can achieve whatever it is before this deadline. And I think we are very willing to negotiate.
Titus, let me ask you. I said when I was asking the productivity question that doesn't apply to you, and of course it doesn't because of the work you've done. But let me ask you very briefly. I thought government really took care of public sector, the health workers generally, with all these incentives and, tax-free, et cetera, because of the COVID, just showing appreciation to you. What hasn't that at least, shown that the government is willing and that maybe the other issues, it's just a difficulty of finding the money to pay?
Well, that's on a very different level. And I think in return, we paid the ultimate price for it. We gave up our very best. We lost about 9 members, medical doctors of very high ranking died in this country in the middle of that battle. While other workers were at home because of lockdown, we were battling. So even though government gave it out as a token of appreciation, I don't think we did not reciprocate that. And I should say that from the discussions from our leadership, they all appreciate the difficulties that we are in. And I think that goes into why even this settlement on the 4% was agreed at the Public Sector Joint Negotiation Committee, which we are not necessarily debating. So it tells you that the Ghanaian worker really appreciates what has gone on. But what is due us, I think, is due us. Evans, I don't think you would admit anywhere that because government gave an incentive, my healthcare should not be taken care of. I don't think that is acceptable anywhere. When I see other government workers come through the system and their healthcare is completely taken care of. And at some point, government attempted to set up a fund to deduct money from me to come and take care of my own healthcare. I think it's just not, it's not on. So we appreciate the gesture government gave then. In reciprocation, we have given our best and we will continue to give our best. In the midst of it, it is the reason why even though the labor law gives us 72 hours to settle all of these, we have given 2 months for government to help us to bring finality to this discussion so that we can continue to offer our best in the middle of a COVID pandemic like this.
Thank you. I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, I would wrap up with my guests in the studio. So what now? Government had said we can't share what we don't have. That means that we simply don't have. As we say in Tree, it comes down to that. So what's the way out of this? I also asked Mr. Game's thoughts on that, and I'll wrap up. Stay with me. Thank you for staying with us. Let me wrap up first with Mr. Game. Mr. Game, so what's the way out of this? So we have GMA now in the picture. We have the aggrieved public sector workers. We have the UTAG, which is currently still in the meeting. What's the way out of this for government? Sorry, the thing is muted. The Zoom is muted.
Sorry, thank you. You can hear me now.
Yes.
To be honest with you, the best solution, like I know it in many countries I've studied, let's pay people not because they appear at the workplace. Let's pay people because they have worked. And labor law is very, very clear. There is no ambiguity about it. Set targets for people, monitor it, appraise them, pay them based on productivity. COVID should be no issue at all, should not even come into the equation. Because if we didn't produce because there was COVID, we'll have a certain X amount of money. That money is what we will share. If we have produced more, it means we have more to share. I know companies during this COVID period, they've worked hard. They've gotten enough money, so they have shared a portion with the workers. So clearly what it is that our government, who is the employer of the public sector people, should clearly come out and tell them at that meeting that, look, we have generated X. This is our expenditure pattern. Apart from what they go to read in Parliament, share the same information with them under Section 97 of the Labour Act and pay people based on productivity. That is the solution. That is what is done in Japan. That is what is done in Singapore. That is what is done in South Africa. That is what is done in your company in Joy FM. That is what is done. Yeah. You are paid based on productivity. People should not appear at work and they pay them for the sake of it. It's wrong.
Yeah. And what would you say to that? Is that the solution?
Oh, in a way, but I think we'll have to be engaged. Yeah. I think that is what we should look at. We'll have to be engaged, like they engaged, how do you call it, our leaders, and they give them the meaning or the reasons why they are giving us the 4%. But we are saying that the 4% is woefully inadequate, and we are not going to accept it. So I think an engagement will rather do, because this is not the time for us to go and look at appraisal, productivity, setting of target, provision, maybe of gadgets and other monitoring and evaluation. This is not the time. Here we are in, excuse me to use my language, to use this language, we appear to be in crisis. Mm-hmm. We are saying we don't want it. So what has to be done so that at least we will sit at the round table and relook at what was agreed on? I think that is what we should do. But if we talk about the issues of management, making sure that productivity is, how do we call it, maximized or whatever, I think this is not the time for us to sit.
Okay. Thank you very much. And let's enjoy the rest of February. We'll see how this pans out in the coming days as the workers engage with government.